Yeah, hello and a warm welcome. So, you're a podcaster or professor making tons of videos, and you want to know how you can save time via audio processing in a DAW. Here we go. Yeah, if you make one video per year, you certainly don't think of how to optimize audio processing. But if you are a professor and do 20 lectures per week, which you need to bring in a digital form. Or if you're a podcaster, have your Zoom live track, for example, or you're a roadcaster and make 5 podcasts per week, and you want to think of how to optimize your audio processing, this might be something for you. Because I want to explain here how using a DAW stands for, I always have to look it up, Digital Audio Workstation. At the end, it's a software where you can do your audio processing, helps you in being more efficient. Of course, honestly, as a beginner, you wouldn't think of using a DAW. And that's also something I was just thinking after I used it for mixing the music of my son in DAW, in this case in Studio One, Presonus Studio One version 4. That's also what I will use to show you. But then I realized that the DAW makes life way simpler later if I process my audio files, and it's getting quicker. Therefore, the time you invent in learning it, you get reimbursed later on by being faster for your audio processing. So if you make a couple of videos per week, or if you make podcasts, or if you make YouTube streams, Twitch streams, or whatsoever, and want to get a better audio in a faster time, this is the thing to watch. So maybe first of all, what is a DAW and what I'm talking about? So I already made a video using Audacity. Audacity is a freeware, and it's also good for processing audio. The drawback of Audacity is it's destructive. So you have to redo it every time. If you have a new audio file, you have to redo everything. And the second thing is, if you did something wrong, you cannot undo it indefinitely. So with a DAW, you don't have this problem. Now, there are several DAWs out there. There are several ones outside Cubase or whatever Logics and so on. And this example is Studio One. DAWs come in different flavors. So Studio One, there are 3 versions. This is now the professional version, but the free version encompasses usually everything you need for our purpose. With a DAW, of course, you can also produce a top 10 song. And therefore, the things you can do with it with the DAW are kind of indefinite. But we here just look at the basic features, and we only need basic features. And usually, you have these in the free version, so it's not a problem that you don't want to invest 500 euros for a fully equipped DAW. If you just need it for audio processing of your podcasts, and if you don't want to produce a top 10 song, there it might be wise to invest it. So how does a DAW look like? As I said, here I'm using Studio One version 4, but at the end other DAWs look similar, like Cubase or whatsoever. So you will have a window where you have your channels and tracks being recorded. We record later on, then you see how this is getting filled here. Then you have a mixer section here where I have my signals coming in. You see now I'm using the PodMic, and you see here the levels going up and down. I will explain that in more detail when we use it. And of course, you have effects and loops and so on, which you have here. We will talk about some of these effects. We don't use instruments and so on. You can use MIDI and you can generate sounds and so on. This is something we don't need to do. We just want to process our audio files. That's it. And loops and whatever samples you have here. So that's the principal structure. And the starting point is, of course, you need to have something in. Usually you would just take your files, your audio files, and drag and drop it into your DAW. Now, in this case, I just record it directly into the DAW. For recording, what I use as an interface, I use the Zoom Live Track L8. And the Zoom Live Track L8, I have already explained how to set up a mix minus setting. This is what I use. So you see here, I have connected 3 microphones to the Zoom Live Track L8. And one of the microphones is the PodMic, which you actually see. The other 2 microphones I have already presented in a separate video. The intention why I use 3 microphones is just that you see the EQ differences. So this is the basic setting. There is an EQ in the Zoom Live Track, and I record the single channels in the live track, and I record the master channel, and I record in the live track the USB out from the computer. So this is the basic setting. Now let's start and let's bring something in to the DAW. So in this case, I just use the Zoom Live Track as an interface and I directly record into the DAW. Okay, so now for the demonstration, let's go. I'm now just recording directly into the Studio One, just pressing record. Now I'm recording these 3 microphones and the master directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master, which encompasses the EQ settings of the Zoom Live Track L8, and it's just normalized with respect to the volume. In the real world, of course, you would not record in the DAW. You just copy your audio tracks by drag and drop. Okay, using 3 microphones, it's clear it looks a bit strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. In a real setting, I would mute the non-used microphones on the live track. So now all microphones with the exception of the PodMic are muted. Which is the standard in my setting. But if I, for example, draw something, I switch to the headset microphone. So this microphone allows me to move freely. However, it's more sensitive to plosives and swallowing sounds, like or smacking sounds. And of course, all this background noise is recorded. And removal of these sounds later is the hallmark of gates. Okay, as I said, the recording is something you would not do in reality. Just going back to the setting, what I actually do is I have now recorded everything there, but at the same time, I record everything in the Zoom Live Track L8, just for the sake of completion. Now, what you want to do now with your audio file is you want to process it in a certain way to optimize the sound. So the first thing people always do is apply an equalizer. And an equalizer is really something where you can rescue a bit cheap and not so good microphones a bit. Yeah. So I want to show you equalizer setting. Just going to the section here. Okay. So as I said, the equalizer is the first thing to do. So you have then it depends on your software, but you will have then the effects section usually in your mixer part. So we want to look at this microphone here, the T-Bone SC300. This is the condenser microphone, and we just open the section. So here you see all effects are off. Now I just, for the demonstration, maybe I delete the equalizer, and I bring in back an equalizer. So what I do is I go to my effects. I go to the equalizer. So the equalizer will look, of course, different from setting to setting. And I will just bring it in this order that it's in the correct order. I just close other effects in order that we can concentrate on the EQ. So that's, of course, the EQ without anything happening. That's how it sounds. To explain how to use the EQ later. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. But this setting... Okay, so this microphone has quite a good sound over the complete range. It's a condenser microphone, so it's very clear, but usually it lags a bit at the low end. So you would like to enhance it a bit to have the sound a bit warmer. The second thing you would like to do is just a low cut, because if you see the frequency, you see that frequency start here. How to use the EQ later. Everything which is here doesn't come from the voice. So everything below 70 hertz or 60, 70 hertz for a male voice is not coming from the microphone or not from your voice, coming from something else. And for females, it's even higher. So you want to cut out everything which is out there. So you apply a low cut filter and cut out this range, make it quite steep and do it a bit back. And I want to increase the lows a bit in order to have a bit more warminess in my voice. And this I keep untouched. You could think of decreasing this area a bit, but this is, let's say, cosmetic in this case. And then I would like to have more presence and to make the things easier to understand. I want to just a tiny little bit increase the mids, and at the end I want to use a shelving filter to make it a bit more brilliant, the sound. And yeah, that's okay. Not too much, because it's already not too bad. So now this is how it sounds without the equalizer. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. Of course, you best listen to that. Of course, it's best to listen to that with a headphone, with a good headphone. In other words, you won't hear too much. If it's just on your mobile phone, you won't see a difference. So this just increases a bit the warmth, a bit more brilliance at the end. And that's it. This is a typical thing what a 3-band equalizer would do. So this is, and a low cut filter. So nothing more. So this makes this microphone already sound quite okay. It's ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use. Okay, so this is the setting for the condenser microphone. And what is important is don't just copy equalizer settings. You should listen to that first. So what I did also before I did that here for the first time, I don't go there by blind. I checked it out first and listened how it makes it sound better, when it's too much, when it's not enough, and that's it. Okay, so if we go now from this condenser microphone, and if we switch now I just remove the equalizer. So this is again the sound without equalizer. Use the EQ later. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. And this is the sound of the headset microphone. This setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. So you see, this sound is way more muffled and missing the haze and so on. So for this sound, we have to do a bit more with the equalizer to get it a bit back to, let's say, an agreeable level. So here, the EQ setting is a bit different. So what you see here is, what I did is, I have a more pronounced low cut. I even decrease the lows, and I decrease in this area even a bit more to make the sound less muffling and not so yeah. And then the haze, there's really something missing, so I had to increase way more here. So if you see such an equalizer profile, it's clear that the microphone cannot be a $500 microphone, but you can somehow how bring it a bit back and rescue a bit. So the original sound sounded like the Champions League final, Bavaria Munich against Paris Saint-Germain on the ZDF. They really had this muffling sound with wind and so on. It was really horrible. I think they had no EQ whatsoever applied. So with this this makes this microphone even better than the Champions League final from the ZDF. So this is without equalizer. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. But okay, so you see, you can rescue somehow a bit this microphone. Of course, it's the audio engineer says shit in, shit out. So you cannot completely make a 40 euro microphone, bring it to 600 euro microphone. So that's clear. So if you own a Shure SM7B for your podcasts, there is not much to do in this equalizer settings, but not all of us have 500 euros in their pocket. So therefore, if you have a different microphone, there might be a bit more need to the correction. So this is one thing what you can do with the equalizer. Another thing is, if you listen to the end, I'm just going the low cut filter, going to the other direction. I take out the equalizer. This setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. So you have heard this breathing noise, and the microphone I use, this headset microphone, is extreme. It's most sensitive, I would say, to this breathing noise. You also see here, this is the most pronounced breathing peak here in this case. What you can do is, I just make the loop a bit smaller. What you can do is now with an equalizer. Now this is without equalizer. How to use the EQ later. Explain how to use the EQ later. Explain how to use the EQ later. Activate the equalizer. Explain how to use the EQ later. You see that the breathing mainly happens here. So what you can do is, just close it even more a bit. If you use the low cut filter a bit more aggressively, you can at least partially cut out this breathing stuff. So just listen to what's happening if I increase the frequency of the low cut filter. How to use the EQ later. 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 So you bring away at least a bit of this, and this helps already to clear it a bit. You shouldn't, of course, you need to balance that with your voice. So for a female voice, this would be perfect. Use the EQ later. For my voice, it's a bit too much because the lows get cut a bit too much. Use the EQ later. But like this, it should be okay. So this is what you can do with a low cut filter and your equalizer. You could, let's say, adapt the microphone to make it sound optimal for speech, and you can, at least to some extent, get away wind noise and so on to some extent. Just activating now the EQ in all of these sessions. So maybe I go now to the PodMic microphone. But this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting, so you hear that this really breaks out and it's way louder. You don't want to have in your audio sounds which go up and scream into the listener's headphone, and others which are too low. So you want to bring the dynamics a bit. You want to narrow the dynamics a bit, that it's easier to listen. And this is done with a compressor. So what you do is, in this case, is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. You use a compressor, and how does a compressor work? A compressor is compressing. And what is it compressing? So you set a certain threshold level, and all signals which go beyond this threshold levels are compressed with the ratio you give here. So this means that as soon as these levels are reached, there is a compression. And if it's 4:1, this means that, let's say, a 12, the 12 decibel over this level are compressed down to 3 decibels. Yeah, so this is what the compression at the end does. And this brings down these very loud voices and therefore normalizes the loudness of the section. So let's see what the compression does. And of course, you need to adjust the threshold that it fits to your recording. This setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is... So you see with this setting, it compresses most. You see it here, and then the signal is going down. At the end, what the compressor does is, as you bring back, you normalize back your signal with the limiter at the end. We will show how that works. At the end, you make silent signals louder and louder signals more silent, but also silent signals louder. So that's compression. That's what you always use if you have a speech recording, audio recording. So we just apply that now to all of our channels. So for compression, you see also attack release. Usually you just keep here the standard parameters, and the input-output gain is just here to normalize that a bit. So you can also leave that in general untouched. So this is not a problem. You bring the the volume back then with the limiter at the end. So that's the equalizing and the compression. And what you also have sometimes is the problem with S's, that the S's are too sharp, the sibilants are too sharp. What you can do there is a so-called de-essing. And de-essing can be done in several ways. One possibility is, now we go to the SC300 again. One possibility is to use a free plugin, which is called TDR Nova, which is a dynamic equalizer. And this works by, in this case, I use the frequency range where the S's appear. It's wise to check first whether that's the correct range. And in this area, don't bring down, just don't take out the signal with an equalizer, because then you take out all the signals. You just wait when an S pushes out, and this is then brought down, and then this looks like this. If you activate that, this is without de-essing. Explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange. And you see with the S's, this then takes down the signal. And also here, you should adjust the threshold that it's not, that it's adapted to your actual recording. So just go there. This setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. It's strange, but this setting is ideal to explain how to use the EQ later. At the same time, I use this for at least a subtle depopper. However, this doesn't work too good, I have to confess. So this, I just do also a dynamic reduction in the low end where the pop noises are there. Okay, so that's, let's say, the very basics. EQ, you should always use. Compression, you should always use. De-essing, you can use. This depends also on your voice and your microphones. So the condenser microphone is more sensitive towards this. The PodMic, for example, is not. This is a dynamic microphone. It's not really a problem with the S's, at least with my voice. Okay. Now, and the last filter I want to show you is the gate. And the gate is something where you can remove then your noise and background noise. Now, if you have a white noise coming from your microphone, you have a bad microphone, bad equipment, and you have this noise all over the time, then in a DAW, usually you don't have a plug-in where you can remove it, because the DAW thinks that if you use a DAW, your equipment is not so bad. If this happens for whatever reason, and you cannot redo the recording, what I do is I remove the white noise in Audacity. So because that's the best removal. So I just take my my audio track, put it in Audacity, use the noise reduction, and save it, and then I put it into the DAW. I have explained that in the Audacity tutorial how to do that. Now, however, what you always have is if you are producing in a surrounding like me, you have the kids and the dogs in the house running around, you have a car passing by, you do something on your desk, you have no optimal surrounding here, then there will be always some background noise. So as soon as you're silent, there is background noise. Possibility one, never be silent, then the background noises make no problem. But sometimes you don't speak, and then you want to have these background noises reduced. And the problem is with compression, as I said, what happens with the compression, the silence gets louder. And this is, of course, also true for the background noise. So you bring up the background noise, and this is something you don't want. And here a gate can help. And here I just show you how this gate actually acts. But I will have a separate video, and I will have a link in the description to this video. I will have a separate video where I explain how to apply it, because that's a bit tricky at the beginning. Okay. As I already said, the headset microphone here is kind of sensitive to these plosives and this smacking sound. So this is how it sounds without a gate. So this microphone allows me to move freely. However, it's more sensitive to plosives and swallowing sounds or smacking. So you have these swallowing sounds and the smacking and this breathing, which is quite ugly later on in your recording. And honestly, I always cutted that out by hand, especially this swallowing sound. And of course, when you do your live stream, you always think, don't swallow. But as soon as you think it's heavy or it's really hard not to do it. And that was always my problem. I couldn't. And then you had this smacking all 10 seconds. So how can you get rid of it? Now, that's as a gate. So this is how it's, you have heard how it sounds without a gate, just again. So this microphone allows me to move freely. However, it's more sensitive to plosives and swallowing sounds or smacking. So this microphone allows me to move freely. However, it's more sensitive to plosives and swallowing sounds or smacking. So this microphone. So you see with the gate, I could completely remove all these smacking sounds, the noise and so on, to a certain extent, of course, but this works really good. Please refer to the extra video where it's shown how to use it. Okay, finally, another thing what you can do with your DAW is we have the master channel. On the master channel, we have all microphones. I said in this case, I use the Zoom live track. So the EQ settings are already there. So in principle, I don't need to do an EQ, which is really the thing which is different from channel to channel. So what I could do is I could use the master channel and do the compression and so on just on the master channel and also the gate. And then I don't have to edit a single microphones. However, in my case, as this headset microphone is so different, for example, from the PodMic and requires really something else, especially with a gate you would like to play around, I prefer to have it on several separate tracks, so I can work on them individually. Again, if you just have one microphone, these things now with automation are not relevant. But what you can do is, I'm just looking where this started. So exactly. So here I had the PodMic activated. You see it here. And here I switched then to the headset microphone. So I would like to change then from this mic to the other one automatically, because at the end I want to do a mix down and I don't want to think of what microphone is used. So what I can do here is I can use an automation, and I'm just listening to this part. I muted the other microphones. Here I mute. But if I, for example, draw something, I switch to the headset microphone. Okay, so here I want to have the PodMic, and then it goes to the headset microphone. And I think this is just rumbling. Yeah, this is just the change. But so I would like to change the signal from here. I want to fade out this microphone, and I want to fade in this microphone. And if you look what's happening, I have now unmuted both microphones. I, for example, draw something. Now, here the level is up. I switch to the headset microphone. Here the level is down of the headset microphone. And as soon as I arrive here, this level goes up, this level goes down. And what you actually hear allows me to move the headset microphone. Of course, automation is a very powerful instrument. You can automate many things in the DAW, not just the volume, but this is just what you need here. One thing which might be interesting for automation is if you have really a part where you have really hard plosives where you cannot get rid of and you cannot redo the recording for whatever reason, what you can use there is a quite harsh low-cut filter, which will take away also some low end of your voice. But this can remove totally the plosives, but you don't want to use that always. You just automate that and equalizer and just activate that at that position. This is sometimes possible, but this is work. So usually I just automate the volume if I switch to another microphone, and I do that during a lecture maybe 2 or 3 times. If you just use one microphone or if you use the master section, automation is no issue. Okay, so that's all of the mixing part. But at the end, all things we did is we lowered the volume. So with our compression, the volume went down. With the EQ, maybe it didn't went down, but it went really up overall. So at the end, we need to bring up the volume to a certain level. It's always wise to record conservatively. So to record at a low level, record with 24-bit, but at a low level in order that you have room to the top. Otherwise, clipping might occur and you lose the signal. But you need to bring it back to a certain loudness level. And this is done then in the mastering. But here we don't do a mastering. We just use a limiter to bring the volume up. So where's the limiter? This is here in our main out channel. And here in the inserts, I have just put a limiter. So now let's have a look how this limiter works. Now this is without limiter. Now I'm recording these 3 microphones and the master directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master. Now I'm recording these 3 microphones and of course with the limiter it gets louder. So what do you do with the limiter? One thing is you limit. This is the ceiling. So I limit to -1 dB. No signal exceeds -1 dB. And then I increase the input in order to come close to the signal to bring the average signal in the range of -12 dB, I would say. So this is what you then adjust. Just showing that the master directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master. Now I'm recording this free microphone, so this would be too much because the limiter often limits, which is not good, and the master directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master. Now I'm recording this free microphones and the master directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master. So, okay, that's how the limiter works. By the way, if you take out the compression, you will see that the limiter, I'm just taking out the compression here, and now you will see that the limiter, now I'm recording this free microphones and the master has directly into Studio One. Just for your information, you're actually listening to the master. Now I'm recording this. So here, this now at the beginning now is no more compressed, and this is then limited, which is not good because the limiter just cuts the compressor, takes the complete signal and compresses it. Okay, so this is again how to bring the loudness back, and that's it. At the end, to summarize, you have optimized the sound of your mics with your voice via an EQ. You have compressed them to normalize it a bit. You have de-essed with a dynamic equalizer, which I have not activated in all channels. And then you have a gate to remove background noise and this smacking around. And you have your limiter to bring it up to a certain loudness. And what you do now is you export everything. So exporting or mix down, it's called. So you generate a WAV file then you can use in whatever software you can upload or whatsoever. So of course you can do your mix down already as an MP3 file or whatsoever if you upload it to a podcasting platform. But what I use is as for video editing, I generate a WAV file, which is then used in the video editing tool. Now, of course, this also looks different from software to software. So here in Studio One, it's called Export Mix. And you just give a name, Mixdown in this case. You can here directly publish it in SoundCloud. This is certainly not something you will do as a professor. And you can then change the format and so on, and what area. So in this case, it would just export the loop area, and then you start the export, and that's it. Of course, the export takes a while, but you don't care. It's calculating. So, okay, if you're still there, you would say, well, that's quite complicated, all of this. Okay, a DAW is not something which is designed to be used just within 5 minutes. This Presonius Studio One is quite simple to use compared to other versions, but it's a certain learning curve, I would say. However, so what I said at the very beginning, if you just produce one video and that's it, processing your audio in a DAW makes no sense because it takes too much time. But if you produce every week 5 videos or podcasts, then it's a wise idea, because what you can do is you save this file, you have all the settings there, and you just then, what you do is you just delete the tracks, drag and drop a new one, and you drag and drop the PodMic audio file, for example, directly to the PodMic stuff. You drag the other microphone to the other one. If you just have one microphone, you will have just one lane. It doesn't matter. And then you have the settings already there. You just have to do some subtle changes in order to bring it back, to optimize it for your actual recording. Mainly, you adjust the threshold levels because it could be a bit louder, a bit less loud. I would recommend you always use the same gain. And that's it. And then you export. So the hands-on time then later on, as soon as you have found your settings, is maybe a couple of minutes. And then the export starts. And during the export, you can do other things. So it's not a problem. And this makes really your workflow way faster. So that's why I recommend, if you have the opportunity, switch to a DAW for your audio processing. Yeah, so that's it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe I could help you and have fun and success with your next lectures, podcasts, Twitch streams, or whatsoever. Thanks for listening and goodbye.